Previously on the science of corruption, we have been able to establish that the lack of adequate independence or autonomy is the major reason why the judiciary is underperforming its constitutional duties. So, based on the fact that nothing happens without a cause, we question why does the judiciary lack adequate independence or autonomy. Now note that this must be a mistake because an independent judiciary is one of the fundamental democratic principles. This is why the Constitution creates, provides, and tries to ensure that the judiciary is actually independent or autonomous as needed. But if at the end of the day, the judiciary still does not have adequate independence, it could be an honest or an intended failure or mistake. But it simply means that the people who crafted our constitution have failed to create adequate independence for the judiciary. Okay? It is not that the judiciary is not independent too. They are not just independent enough to function effectively as we need them to. So, in our previous discussions, we have been able to point out the bias done to the judiciary in the process of how these officials in the three branches of government get into office or power. For the executive, the president or governor gets into power by voting. This is done because the president or governor needs to be protected from undue or unlawful external control or influence. Now, to further guarantee this level of protection or independence, immunity is added to the office of the president or governor. For the Senate, lawmakers are also voted into power or office. Same process, same reason, which is to protect individual lawmakers from unlawful and undue external influence, pressure, or control. But when it comes to the judiciary, judges are only being appointed into power rather than being voted for. So I call this a necessary bias because even if you justify why the judiciary cannot become partisan, I will agree, but you cannot or should not deny the fact that this bias or mistake creates an imbalance in the levels of powers or independence or autonomy accorded to these three branches of government in this regard. Now, assuming if these were kilos of powers or independence given to these branches of government to serve as protection from undue or unlawful external control or influence, the Constitution has given 5 kilos to the executive through voting and 5 kilos extra by adding immunity to the office of the president or governor. By voting, the legislature also gets 5 kilos of power, but by appointment, the judiciary goes home with only 3 kilos of power or independence or autonomy to be used as protection against undue and unlawful external control or influence. And since this is not a reliable tool of protection against external influence, the Constitution tries to complement this error or bias or mistake by saying, let's share the function of appointing judicial officers into office amongst three bodies, the NJC, the executive, and the legislature, in order to discourage any form of potential undue or unlawful influence or control or manipulations that may arise from this activity of appointing justices or the judicial officers. Since mere appointments are more susceptible to external influence, manipulations, or control. Again, when it comes to the area of finance, observe another bias done to the judiciary or an imbalance that is created. I don't know if this is necessary, but the executive are in charge of the money. The legislature approves the budget being presented by the executive, and they decide how these resources are being shared. The judiciary, again, has no role to play in this regard. They only request for their own budget or money for the year. Again, let's share or represent these functions. 3 of them play in kilos of powers for better understanding. So for the executive, 5 kilos of power or protection, which transcends into independence or autonomy. For the legislature, another 5 kilos. Now to the judiciary, they play no role apart from requesting for their budget for the year. So let's say 1 kilo. Again, I don't see balance in this regard too. Now to the process of impeachment. To impeach a president or governor, the legislature are the ones to approve or decide whether an allegation against the president or the governor is worth investigating or not. If it is worth investigating, they will go on to request the Chief Justice to select a panel of 7 people, which to him are of unquestionable integrity to carry out this investigation. If the president or governor is found guilty at the end of the day, the legislature still holds the ultimate power to decide through a 2/3 majority vote of House members whether to adopt this report or not. If the report is adopted, the legislature then impeaches the president or governor from office. So, to your own understanding, if we were to also convert this, the weight of the role or functions played by the legislature and the judiciary in the process of impeaching the president into kilos of powers used for check and balance. The legislature, I would say, they have 5 kilos. The judiciary has just 2 kilos. Another bias, so I still don't see equality or balance of power in this sharing formula or arrangement. Again, observe another bias. To remove a lawmaker from office or house, a petition is signed and presented to the INEC by constituents. INEC confirms this petition, conducts a referendum, and if a majority of the voters in such a constituency are in favor of this petition, INEC will then send a certificate of recall to the Speaker of either houses. Then the lawmaker is removed from the house. Here, the voters and the INEC play the major role. You understand? So the legislative house, on the other hand, only responds to this command. So let's say 2 kilos of power to the legislature in this regard. This time, the executive don't play a role in this regard. So let's say 0 kilo of power for the executive. And as usual, 0 kilo of power for the judiciary, since they also don't play a role. But when it is time to impeach chief justices, the president or governor acting on an address supported by a 2/3 majority of House members goes ahead to impeach the chief justice from office. So since they both play equal roles in this regards, let's say 5 kilos for the executive, used for check and balance for the legislature, 5 kilos for the executive, 5 for the legislature, just 2 kilos for the NJC, since they only present an address or petition to the governor, present a report to the governor. So now let's do the math. Let's calculate the kilos and see who has more powers and who has less, so that we can now pinpoint the imbalance. This is 5, 10, 15, 20, and 0. So you now have 20 kilos of power for the executive. Here you have 5, 5. This is 15. You have 17, and you have 22. This is 22 kilos of power for the legislature. Now for the judiciary, you have 3 kilos. You have 1, you have 2, you have 0, you have 2. So this is 5, and this is 8 kilos of power for the judiciary. You get. So how do you share power disproportionately and you expect that it should be balanced because you wanted it to be balanced? There is no balance here. This is an improper separation of power, and it results to an imbalance, which is now constituting an ineffective system of check and balance between these 3 branches of government. You cannot expect that the judiciary, who has less power systemically, maybe the one that they talk from out, see they are independent, this is all the level of independence that they have, to now checkmate the excesses of the legislature and the executive. This will not work. You cannot do this kind of programming and expect a different result. This sharing of power will only result to an ineffective system of check and balance. So if you want the system to be effective, you have to redo this math.